Next, I'd like to introduce Susan Malaika from IBM. She's a researcher in open source methods there, sorry, and AI, and she's kindly agreed to give us our keynote speech. So let me just bring up your presentation.
Thank you so much, Ruben. Yes, so I'm Susan Malaika. I work here in New York in the digital business group of IBM. I'm focused on increasing IBM's contribution and consumption of open source. How many of you are based in this area? Okay, just looking to see. Okay, about half. And how many of you were at the Paris Acumos Day? Ah, so that's only one other. Okay, I was there too. Yeah, so I'm very excited to be here. I'm going to be talking around AI. I'm going to avoid presenting or getting close to the features of Acumos. I'm just going to talk about AI in general and some of IBM's activities and open source projects in AI. I've got my Twitter handle on there. I do run meetups here in New York, and in fact, we do have a meetup coming up this week on AI fairness, so I'll be tweeting that out. And it's quite funny to be here today. I was on Friday speaking with Scott at the Columbia Law School about licenses and open source also. Okay, so let me see if the bottom wants to move it forward. Doesn't do anything. Let's try again. Okay, do you want to?
Just tried it. Oh, wrong way. There we
go.
Okay,
so which one was it?
This one.
This one, okay. So my agenda is I'm going to make some remarks on AI, and then going to talk about some AI projects, and then sharing data and models, rather than just sharing code. So that's going to be a section, and then trusting AI systems, and then what's coming next. And there's a lot of slides also in backup, which I won't be covering, but might be handy for later discussions. Okay, so Wired magazine in 2016 said it was the end of code. And it was an article which gave the idea that we'd be training our software like we train dogs. No longer will we be coding, we'll be just training. And in a sense, we're going to be doing a lot more training as a result of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning. But there are new artifacts that now we have to take care of and share, not just code. And that means that's data and models, as an example. So we're going to be wanting to work together and to collaborate on data and on models, in addition to software, which will continue, but there'll be a lot more work going on in the model area, and which is very much the reason for Acumos and other related projects, and indeed the Deep Learning Foundation. And so some of the topics around the issues around data and sharing data is and models is what licenses do you use? With software, we've had 20, 30 years of work on licenses for sharing software. Licenses where you share the software but don't require other people to share their modifications, and licenses where people can modify the software but don't need to share. For example, what are we going to do about data? Similarly for models. And so I'm going to be talking briefly about some concepts like fact sheets and so on. Moving on to, whoops, I keep wanting to use the computer. So building AI is still hard, and there are many areas that have challenges. And so just as examples, there's companies don't have access to lots of labeled data. So, and there aren't really proper ways of describing how to collect that data, how to crowdsource that data, how to make it available within companies for employees to use and to share, and indeed to share it externally. So there are methods to do that kind of thing. There aren't tools yet for monitoring your AI and debugging your AI. It's very difficult, and they're just emerging now. But it's very difficult to understand what's wrong with your AI when it doesn't perform the way you want it to. And there are no standards in this area for composing models and AI systems. And of course, there are concerns about security and concerns about tampering with the AI. So these are all issues, which is why I guess groups like the Linux Foundation are trying to get together to create the deep learning, to created the Deep Learning Foundation in order to solve some of these problems. And there are many point solutions, many bits of open source that are evolving at different speeds. And the more people get together and share, the better people will be able to get a handle on what's going on. So, and there are some systems that offer AI APIs, and that does take developers quite a significant way to get started. But then people then do want to adapt and retrain what's behind the API. So the challenges are in three categories, broadly speaking: in the training stage, the collection of the data and the training of the data, using the data to train the AI, in the deployment stage, and then in the inferencing stage, in the prediction stage. So these are some of the topics that are listed that have to do with the problems that we just outlined on the previous slide, but you can categorize them into those three stages. And again, some of the work of Akimos and so on is trying to address these issues and to help organize these difficulties. And there is an emerging discipline now, AI engineering, just like in the world of data. The AI, data engineers emerged, people who know how to manage the data, how to deploy it so it performs well, how to index it, and so on. And people became experts at making systems go speedily in data. And now we see the emergence of AI engineering, which has again many stages, many specialties. So handling the data, managing the data, offering the various data framework, various AI frameworks like TensorFlow and PyTorch and so on as services. Doing network optimizations, actually making it perform speedily. AI in the cloud is very different in the way cloud has evolved. Cloud has evolved to solve short transactional type operations. It hasn't really evolved to handle heavy duty, high processing software, which is what AI needs. So we're going to have to see more further changes in the way cloud systems are organized in order to help AI systems run speedily. So we'll see an increased focus on performance, just like in sort of going back maybe 10, 15 years, there was a huge emphasis on performance, and AI brings that emphasis back again with the need for a different kind of processing, and hence the popularity of GPUs and so on. And I'll mention at this point some slides at the end of the presentation, which I'm not going to cover, but it's some work that we did around how enterprises need to do their AI performance measurement, because there are AI benchmarks coming out and gaining popularity, but they don't necessarily follow what enterprises need. They don't look at all the aspects that an enterprise might need for AI performance. So we've worked on we've done some work, and we published a paper at the TPC workshop at the VLDB conference in August. And I've put some slides about that at the end. Again, this is another topic that relates to AI engineering. Moving on, there are with reference, let's say, to some of the IBM products, there are three approaches for building AI models. And this slide kind of outlines them, and all these ways of doing AI are available in product, and some are in open source also. So there's the pre-trained AI, where you have APIs that an application developer can incorporate into their software just through an API. And so they can offer a question and get an answer. Is this photo of a cat? And the AI could answer, yes, it is a cat, as an example. And underneath the pre-trained AI, there are some specific products listed that offer this kind of an interface to an application. The second way is where you actually have some training done, but you augment it with some of your own data so that you customize the AI to your environment. And that's transfer learning. And again, there are some products listed down there relating to software that enables a developer to adapt the AI to their own environment. Now, I have a question to the audience. Who knows what SME stands for? Oh, subject matter expert. It's funny. I always think only IBM people know what it stands for, but it seems like, well, I'm surprised that more of you do use it in your companies, SME, or yes, you do. Okay, because yeah, I mean, there are whole huge numbers of people who have no clue when you say SME. But anyway, I left it on the slide as a test for the audience. Okay, and then there's custom AI, where you actually build the model yourself, and that you do need experts. And as Mazen mentioned earlier in his opening remarks, there's a shortage of people who can build models from scratch. But that's the third kind. And again, there are some tools and software, some of it open source, to help developers and help data scientists and specialists to develop a model that's particular for their environment. Moving on, just to mention that we do have a group called CODE, the past tense of code in French, the language of diplomacy. So it's the Center of Open Source Data and AI Technologies. It's a group in IBM that is focused on AI and open source solely. So that's what they do. And they have, some of them worked on IBM's contributions to Spark, and now they're moving on working in a variety of areas. And also there's kind of just on the bottom right, some of the open source tools and software for the whole training and AI lifecycle that they work on, but they are developing and supporting new projects, as well as contributing to projects like TensorFlow and PyTorch and so on. And I didn't mention the history, but I will briefly mention it because I was only going to talk about today and tomorrow, not the past, but because Mazen mentioned the AT&T history, I will mention that IBM also has a long history in AI, and just some of them, if you know the movie, is it called 2001: A Space Odyssey? That computer in there was inspired by IBM, and there's a computer that sings in that movie, and that was a movie from a computer from IBM that sang, I think, 10 years before, and they incorporated the song and the idea into the movie. And then more recently, there was the chess championship, the Blue Gene, and even more recently, the Jeopardy contest. So these are all activities that came out of IBM, and in fact, the focus on AI has motivated IBM to also work on very large computers, and the Summit computer, which came out, I think, a few months ago, is the most high-powered computer in the world. As it may not, those rankings change very fast, but 3 or 4 months ago, it was is the top performing, and with the increased emphasis on on performance that AI brings. I'm going to talk a little bit about the emergence of leaderboards. Is anybody in here in this meeting on a leaderboard, an AI leaderboard? Okay, nobody is. So leaderboards have become a very popular way to compete in the AI environment. And Kaggle is a company that was acquired by Google. They run these contests around data sets. And so there'll be a contest with a prize, and people will have to develop some software that predicts what this contest is requiring you to predict from a data set with the best accuracy possible. So the contest is measuring accuracy. And this has become very popular, and people are on this leaderboard. They're ranked. And in fact, I remember recently someone invited a speaker to speak about how to compete in these contests. And another colleague was kind of upset. Why did you invite that person? I'm more highly ranked. You know, you invited the wrong person to present because I'm higher up in the leaderboard. It's a very prestigious thing to be high on this on these leaderboards. And I just wanted to mention, because of the low numbers of percentages of women in this domain, in particular, and in the contests in particular, the Women in Data Science run a contest every year called Women in Data Science Datathon, and it's coming up very soon. And I would encourage men and women to form teams. Men can also participate, but the teams that participate in the Women in Data Science, the team has to be more than half women. Okay, but it's a great way to increase the number of women who are in this community. And last year in the contest, it was the first time we had 12 teams from IBM competing, and I'd like to encourage AT&T and all the companies represented here to actually take a look at especially the Women in Data Science Datathon. And the Women in Data Science also run a conference on March the 4th, I think it's in 2019. It ties in very well with the Women's Day, and there will be presence in New York. Every city typically will have an outpost of this conference. So there are two separate things, but I would like to encourage you to take that into account. And leaderboards have become a way of engaging in AI. And I will say, you don't have to be a total, geek to participate. One of the teams from IBM that was very highly ranked in the Datathon, she just used sort of spreadsheet. And she got as much accuracy as people using more complicated AI solutions. So you can start in a straightforward way, but it's great to be a part of the community. Moving on, I also, just to make it a little bit more personal, I do a lot of activities in the Middle East. I also was in India recently and did some AI activities there. And in India, we're thinking of crowdsourcing a data set around Indian food photos. But if anyone's interested, please come and discuss, because we're running a series of events in India to populate that data set. Remember, I said there's a shortage of data sets that we can work with. And so we're trying to do that. But I also mentioned that in the Middle East, AI is very big, as is blockchain. And in fact, I'm currently working on an upcoming AI blockchain hackathon for healthcare. I do get involved with a number of hackathons and have run a number, but it's a great way also to engage if you haven't done anything in this area before. And it's a great way for companies to get started. I do know of a number of companies who've got started through participating in a hackathon. And I also, just to mention, the United Arab Emirates, in particular the UAE, they have a minister for AI. It's that important. But I'll emphasize the combination of AI and other technologies like blockchain is the use of the two together is becoming popular. And that came up also in India when I was at the Freight Forwarders conference, which was an international conference, but that came up there too. So just wanted to share and also maybe grow the community of the Deep Learning Foundation with people who are interested in AI from India and from what we have, I think, a lot of representation through Tech Mahindra from India, but also from the Middle East and North Africa. Okay, moving on now to sharing data models. So just to go through briefly some of the things that are going on that have to do, that might help the Deep Learning Foundation, might help in general around sharing data and models. So one of them is the Community Data License Agreement. That is actually from the Linux Foundation. And it's a license for data sets with the two flavors, the flavor that you can contribute your data set, but don't require anyone who then uses it to incorporate their changes. And the other flavor where you actually let people use the data set, but you insist that they contribute any additions that they make. I do run a weekly series of calls on Thursdays, 30 minutes after the TAC meeting of the Acumos. And that, I'll show you the link to it. And the call of this coming Thursday is on this license, the CDLA license. So, and I'll be tweeting that out too. So that's something that might be very interesting to this community. Another project that I'm involved in, that I think might be interesting to the community here. It is already a Linux Foundation project. It's called Egeria, but I wanted to highlight it because I think it might be relevant. It's about sharing metadata, so that is data about data. There have been many attempts through the last 20 years to standardize on how you describe metadata and how you share it across tools. And usually the attempts have been around making sure you have one repository that contains everything. This Egeria is really focused on sharing the data, the metadata across the tools, but without designating one of the tools the master. So everybody shares, and so it has some APIs for the repositories, the tools that have data to be able to publish their data when requested, and the tools above, like visualization tools and so on, can request metadata from what we call the metadata highway that Egeria incorporates. Egeria is a goddess of wisdom, just as background for you, a Roman goddess of wisdom. So that project already exists, and we're at the stage now where we're recruiting companies, tool companies, but it's been done in partnership between ING Group, which is a bank, and IBM, and Hortonworks and SAS just joined as well. And it looks very fruitful. It has a method also for describing the metadata, the data types, and so on in a JSON style notation. Moving on, I just wanted to draw your attention to Data Sheets, which is a paper that was written. Again, it's a proposal for data sets. What questions should people, just like nutrition sheets, like food has a description of what's inside. Well, having a data sheet where the supplier of the data set has to explain what's in the data set. So this is, at this point, just a proposal. I put a link to the paper. You can go and read it. And but this, again, it might be a nice thing to actually standardize on something like that, a concept like that. And also the other area, which I think you've been dealing with in the Deep Learning Foundation weekly calls, is all the different ways of sharing models. And I think you've covered PFA and Onyx already, but it would be great if when you store models and when you have an agreed way of sharing models, each of these ways of sharing models came from a different point in history. First PMML, then PFA, and then Onyx, and also and each one caters very well for the tools of the time that it emerged. And the notation also, so the PMML is primarily XML, PFA is primarily JSON, again reflecting the eras in which they emerged. But it would be really nice to have a way of sharing models that different tools can agree. And of course, there's a whole separate thing of when you put it in a container and then what does it mean? Moving on to a little bit to trust. So AI systems are have characteristics where you actually don't know quite why it decided something sometimes. And I was at a panel last week in New York where there were experts on the panel, and they were people who create models, and they said they really don't understand, even though they're the expert, and they created the model, they cannot understand exactly why a tool that they created is making a particular recommendation. So these are some of the questions that we should require an AI system to be able to answer, or to be able to comply with. Is it fair? Is it easy? Can you understand? People are saying experts are saying they can't understand what the tool, the AI tool is telling them. Did anyone tamper with it and make it say something that it shouldn't? And then does it log and provide a log of everything that it did? In other words, is it accountable? So again, I'm going to talk briefly about some various activities that may be relevant. So there's a couple of open source projects that have come out from IBM recently, AI Fairness 360, which is a set of tools that enable you to figure out whether your AI at the various stages, the training, the prediction, and so on, is being fair. And also the adversarial robustness toolkit has somebody interfered with the AI. And then also to mention that there's this notion of fact sheets for AI as well. So there's a paper that's come out proposing that an AI, just like we said, nutrition labels for food and data sheets for data, but also have fact sheets in a similar way for AI services. And so the adversarial toolkit, the kind of examples, it's a set of software that you can download and work with. The kind of issues that it helps you deal with is, I mean, this is a really scary example where somebody interferes with what the system is seeing and makes it a self-driving car not see the people on the street or in the road. So this is an example of adversarial attack. Put the reference to the paper there. And the toolkit is trying to help address, and it's got a wide set of little tools that you can go in and utilize in your AI system to help avoid these kind of adversarial attacks. The AI Fairness, again, has some data sets. It has, again, a set of tools, some of them specifically from IBM that have been open sourced. Some are tools that are widely used already for fairness, but have been brought together. And the key differentiator of this AI Fairness 360 toolkit is it also gives you ideas of how to mitigate the things that may go wrong. Just to mention, we have a meetup this week, put the links. I also put the link to these slides in the Zoom. So if any of you in the Zoom, you can get all these links. And there's a meetup this week on AI Fairness. And we've also got the weekly talks where we've covered some of all these tools that I've talked about already. You can listen to the recordings. What's next for AI? So it really has become a world of where AI will be everywhere. And even, as I said, I was at a freight forwarders conference. These are the people who fill the containers and so on, not the people who own the containers, but the people who fill, they're still using paper. There were airports and ports, they're still, but they're looking to digitize and go straight into AI, even and blockchain, so to leapfrog. So all the industries are looking to be affected, and including ones that are not even digitized yet. There's deeper insights. There are some projects listed there that have difficult words. Quantum computing, I should mention, IBM has the quantum computing access on the cloud. You can play through an API and a Jupyter notebook with a quantum computer. And there's also very fancy things like homomorphic everywhere. That means it means being able to do computation on encrypted data and get the same results that you would get if it was unencrypted. So being able, you know, with the issues with privacy and all this data everywhere, you don't really want to make it available, but you want to be able to do AI on it, but be able to do AI on it while it's encrypted. So that's another example. That more engagement, different kinds of engagement, and of course personalization to the detail of an individual, and so on. So it's really it's everywhere, as Mazen said, and I think I'm being told I have to go now, and I'm done. I'm sorry to take up so much of your time, but here's some links, and I hope you will join us in the various meetups and activities we have in New York and the virtual calls as well. Thank you.